Hello and welcome to the Aftershock. Uh, I'm Phil Leva, joined tonight by Colin Etnier and Alex Morgan. And hey, we have a whole new look, a new Aftershock logo. We have a new intro, but things remain the same for the Earthquakes. A 2-1 loss to start the season. Really tough, really tough there with the goal from with Dante Seeley to seal it for FC Dallas to get the 3 points at home. Alex, I'm going to kick it over to you first. Just your thoughts. There's so much to talk about in regard to this match, right? You had an opportunity to speak with Luchi Gonzalez in Coachella during the preseason. You asked him particularly about the number 10 position or the center attacking midfield position. And that seemed to be an area of concern that you were focused on. I'm curious, particularly in addition to your opening thoughts, what are you seeing there from what Luchi's approach was against FC Dallas tonight?
Yeah, it's an unfortunate result to open the season with. It feels a little bit like last season's regular season opener against Atlanta United, where they went on the road and lost 2-1 to a stoppage time goal as well. That seems to be a pattern now, an unfortunate one that, hopefully they can break next year. What was interesting about this one is that the starting lineup, it felt like we were still watching the 2023 San Jose Earthquakes because they weren't able to get their new signings in there in the starting lineup because of fitness issues, because of visa issues. And so it really felt like the same 2023 team and some of the same struggles that they had and the same positives as well. I mean, the goal from Christian Espinosa was great. Jack Skahan, I actually thought, did a really good job in that number 10 position throughout the game. He was, again, one of the bright spots. And this is a team, this already was a team that has a pretty high floor. I think that can go toe to toe with any team in the Western Conference and generally is going to be pretty solid. But doesn't convince me that they have a super high ceiling just yet. And we saw maybe some bright spots from Mal Pellegrino in the second half. I thought he made a really good impact. I'm really looking forward to seeing more of him this season. He's their new left winger from Norway. And I thought, Preston Judd had some good minutes up top, but it still feels like they need that DP number 10 to take this team to the next level and to convince me that this team is significantly better than last year. Thus far, it seems like there are only marginal changes here and there from what we were looking at in 2023.
Yeah, what do you think, Colin? A lot of the same. The lineup looks very similar. There are a couple minor changes, right? We saw Jack Skahan obviously getting the start here. One of the major differences in the lineup, and Benji Kikanovic, right, was the other one. So, what do you think after getting through the first match of the season for the Quakes? Your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that's how you evaluate these. If you want to take a temperature of how optimistic or pessimistic you should be, either way, you're starting from that same point, which is this is largely the same personnel as last year. Although I will say they never set up with this particular 11 in this particular way down the stretch last year. It looked quite different. And they made some different decisions. You have Hoppy and more of a 4-4-2 by the end of the year. That it is a different look.
Still miss him
for sure, but it's a different look. So it's not the same look as the end of last year. And I actually thought that they possessed the ball pretty well for periods of the game. And I think that they were set up in a way that actually made a lot of sense to me, largely as a countering kind of team. That all made sense. But fundamentally, no one in that 11 is a new player, and we know that there was a lot of turnover. So if you're a pessimist, you're saying, well, I'm seeing more of the same, which wasn't terrible, by the way. I mean, for those of us who've been Quakes fans for a long enough time, this is definitely not in the pantheon of bad Quakes performances. But if you're an optimist, you're saying, look, if you take what we saw today, and you take that as kind of the basement of where they're going to be, if you add in a new center back, hopefully someone who can contribute something that's a little bit more than Tanner Beeson, hopefully Amal Pellegrino can provide a spark on the wing or however they choose to utilize him. Hopefully they go into the market and get that DP that they're hunting for. You could imagine this team becoming a good team, but it's still in the zone of projection rather than current state reality. And so that's why, I would say tempered expectations, but sky isn't necessarily falling for me either. So I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at. But obviously super disappointing to give up that late goal. And this is exactly like Atlanta last year. A goal that very much changed how the game is going to sit with fans. That one moment takes hey, that's a solid road draw with without any of your new players really, and without the full team being there, not bad, to feels dire, sky is falling. I don't think either are necessarily fair. I think that they were generally outplayed in the game, but yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, is like, if this is the floor, not too bad. But we'll see how many pieces
Right.
they to it to get better.
Yeah, it's always tough going on the road and getting a point regardless, right? Now, it should be said that FC Dallas was missing some key players of their own, right? We didn't see Paxton Pomykal. We didn't see Jesus Ferreira. We didn't see their newer signings, Velasco, right, who's injured. We also didn't see Musa, who's the guy who's supposed to come in, one of the biggest signings in the history of Dallas. And yet, the Quakes go out there and they put a pretty good effort against a team that actually looked very good as well at times, considering. Right. So, Alex, you had mentioned that Christian Espinoza was one of the bright spots in this match. He was the one who started the goal opportunity, right? The one that was scored by Benji Kikanovic with a surge up the right side. Could you kind of like walk us through that, like your reaction to it, and what you think was different with Benji Kikanovic in that position as opposed to what we had seen from Cade Cowell before, especially considering, as somebody just noted in the chat, Cade Cowell did score a goal tonight for Chivas, by the way.
Well, both Cade and Benji scored tonight, and Benji could have had more goals as well. I actually thought the front three played pretty well tonight. Christian Espinosa is going to do what Christian Espinosa does. Apparently, FC Dallas hadn't watched their game tape properly because they allowed him to get in behind in the first 20 minutes of the game and get in a cutback to Jack Skane. I thought that Jeremy Ebobisse had some good connections with Skane at the 10. There was a couple moments, especially in the second half, where he was able to get some good layoffs and get involved and get diagonal runs in, and they played off each other very well. And this was the best we've seen Benji Kikanovic play in over a year, I think. He was involved in this game. He was getting on the ball. He was getting in dangerous spaces. Maybe he could have put another one of those in the back of the net, but there were two pretty good saves made by the Dallas keeper. And you have to give him credit for being in the right space at the right time for that goal and for generally looking more confident. I thought the Quakes were playing the best when they were making those, balls, those runs in behind and playing those vertical balls in behind. There's, I think, a short period in the first half where they were doing it, and a really good period at the beginning of the second half when they were able to get the ball out wide and to get vertical balls in behind to runs from Kikanovic, runs from Skane, runs from Ebobisse, runs from Espinosa. That's when they looked the most dangerous to me. Colin said it, I think, a little bit, that they were set up as a kind of counterattacking vertical team. When they leaned into that, it felt good to me. And when they weren't playing as directly, when they were keeping the ball a little bit more and going a little bit slower, it still didn't make a ton of sense to me. Again, Jack Skane is not the kind of number 10 who's going to be, playing in tight spaces and moving the ball very quickly. The Quakes need to get a player in this lineup who can do that, because they're going to face those situations throughout the season. But Jack Skane is a really good guy when you're looking to break down the line, when you're looking to quickly attack and press the tempo. And he was critical to that first goal as well. Playing the ball out wide for Espinosa, then getting in the box and having the shot on target. So generally positive performance, I think, from the front three. Again, I'll shout out Pellegrino again, because the way that he was kind of ghosting into the channel in the second half was really impressive. I loved how simple and effective his play was. Every single time he got on the ball, he was calm and composed and made the right decision quickly. And that was really, really valuable. He wasn't always playing the hero pass. He wasn't always playing the incisive ball behind, but sometimes it was just a matter of holding up for 2 seconds and then playing the open run. And that allowed the Quakes to move the ball quicker in the attacking part of the field. And that made their attack a lot better. And so I think it'll be interesting. It feels like there is more balance to this front line.
It definitely brought another dimension.
Jamin ran a poll at halftime saying, are more goals going to come from Christian Espinosa on the right or from Pellegrino and Kikanovic on the left? And based on this, I think first game, that's an open question. I think that Benji and Pellegrino could really combine for 10, 15 goals this season and balance out that a little bit more. Again, they still need more goals from the midfield. They need somebody in the midfield who's comfortable shooting from distance. Right now, Christian Espinosa is still the only player, maybe Paul Marie. We didn't see it in this game, but really in the attack, he's the only player comfortable shooting from distance. And oftentimes when they're cycling the ball in the attacking half, they're really just looking to get it to him and have him take a crack from 25 yards. And
I
that's
do
not
want
a
to take a
super
moment here,
multidimensional way
Alex,
of playing.
to talk about Jeremy Ebobisse's performance as well, because this has come up in the chat. I know you're probably getting around to that a little bit more too, but I want to bring Colin into the conversation here because I think I'm really interested to hear what your thoughts are, Colin, as well. Jeremy Ebobisse, you know, maybe not as present during the match tonight, although he had the really good near post run on the goal that was scored. Right, it was just a really effective. Just a really effective attack, right? It was three-pronged. You had the late run, you had Jeremy Ebobisse on the near post, and then, of course, you had Benji on the back post to clean up. Just kind of your thoughts about Benji's performance overall. He ends up getting subbed in the 66th minute for Preston Judd. And maybe, Alex, I don't know, that's something that I'm thinking about in
fundamentally,
terms
it was
of
Pellegrino who's taking up the space that, you know, he was
yeah,
subbed for.
yeah. Anyway, Colin, your thoughts on Ebobisse's performance here and the kind of shift in the attack once he came off the pitch.
Yeah, well, so first of all, I totally am on board with all of Alex's tactical analysis there. I think that, and that actually, by the way, was encouraging to me because I don't think one of the big differences at the end of last year, it was a very defensive setup. They weren't breaking as quickly or as proactively as they were today. And today was much more proactive about getting out on the break and starting, you know, and running. There's a little bit higher pressure, a little bit. And I think that those things largely made sense to me, and they made sense with the personnel, and that was encouraging. Like, it was a much, in my opinion, especially for an away match at the beginning of the year when you don't have all your guys, I thought it was a little bit more of a front foot kind of stance, and the tactics seemed to match pretty well, and they seemed to match the personnel. Think about Ebobisse, underneath Ebobisse, think about that line of Kikanovic, Scan, Espinosa. Even when Cade Cowell was on the team, Kikanovic and Scan were very close to him in terms of like physical testing, in terms of the just pure raw speed. You know, I think that people kind of underrate how fast Benji Kikanovic is in the open field. Espinosa probably wouldn't, like, in a 100-meter sprint beat Benji, but he's quick. He plays vertically. Vertical is the word I would use on all of those things. All three of those guys are really good at turning up field. And I think that if you look at Jackson Ewell's passing map, you probably see a lot of these kind of vertical balls up. I have not checked it out yet, but I'm assuming, just based on having watched it, that, you know, there's a lot of these balls trying to release guys up vertically, and there were some good combinations between Scan and Espinosa as they were trying to do those vertical combinations. All that made sense to me. The problem is that kind of leaves Ebobisse out of the picture. Which is fine, you know, game to game, situation to situation, you're going to have different tactical approaches, but he is not a facing goal, turn and run, you know, vertical, you know, kind of guy. He's actually best back to goal, combining with guys who are right underneath him, and, you know, and getting in on the very end of a move. So I think that the part of why we weren't seeing a lot of Ebobisse was tactics. I think that he would do better with, you know, actually he does better with a guy more like Jamiro Montero underneath him than Jack Scan. Jack Scan is going to, like, turn and run up the field a little bit more. Montero is going to try to kind of, you know, get through these tight spaces and combine. I think, therefore, I'm inclined a little bit to say that his absence was more due to, or his perceived absence is more due to the tactics than just being bad. And I think that's generally true of nines in general. Like, the performance that you see out of the striker heavily depends on everything else that's going on the pitch. And so to me, that's where it was today. But it seems a little bit like the three guys underneath him all fit the system quite well. And he was the one who was a little bit of a square peg in the round hole in that system. And it's going to be up to Lucci to find a way to get the entire attacking group to fit together more cohesively. To me, Ebobisse was the tactically the odd man out. And, you know, he did his job, but, you know, it obviously was not influential today. Whereas Benji was put up in a great position.
When it comes to some of the attacking passes that came not just from the attack itself, but a little deeper in the pitch. We got to see both Jackson Ewell and Carlos Grueso playing a little bit deeper as, like, defensive mids throughout the match. There were a couple of moments here, Alex, where we saw both Paul Marie and Jackson Ewell make some line-breaking passes. It's one of those things that we've heard from Lucci a lot. Like, every time that we have an opportunity to talk to him in the post-game press conferences, or when you've had an opportunity to talk to him preseason, one motif that keeps coming up is breaking lines, right? That's something that's really important to him in the buildup for the attack. Both Ewell and Marie had opportunities to do that tonight. What are you seeing here? Like, how were they able to, in which moments, to be more particular, do you think that the Quakes were able to identify in order to make those passes, if that makes sense? Like, what was it that they found in FC Dallas's vulnerabilities in order to make those passes? Because we did see some really deep runs from like Benji Kikanovic, and we saw him latch onto the end of some of these passes from these guys. And in your eyes, what were the moments in which that was happening, and where's the optimism, where's the encouragement that we can hope for as we move forward? Is this team going to continue to have these moments?
If I'm going to be honest, I don't think they did that through the midfield. I don't think that Jackson Ewell was usually the source of those passes. I don't think that Carlos Gruezo was usually the source of those passes. I think they looked best when they were playing down the wings, when it was Carlos Acapo who could put a ball on behind, and when it was Paul Marie who's always looking to go forward and play those balls. And Vitor Costa as well. I thought he did a good job getting up on the overlap, and he only had like 30 minutes. And again, is a guy who was not in midseason form. And had a short preseason. So that's where it was coming from, was playing in the wide areas and having the fullbacks moving forward. If there's any area of the field that I was disappointed by today the most, it was probably the midfield. It was probably you and Gruezo, and then later like Alfredo Morales and Baldissimo. I think Baldissimo and Morales were in large part at fault for that 94th minute goal that Dallas had. It's a very clear moment that as the central midfielders, you both need to be goal side when there is 30 seconds left and the other team is attacking. And Alfredo Morales, the defensive midfielder, was pressing the center backs on the ball for no reason whatsoever, apparently. And Baldissimo was not covering in order to, adjust. And, Dallas were able to play in behind, and all it takes is one lucky bounce and, Danielle being blindsided, and there you go. The game flips on a switch like that. So if there's any area of the field that I still didn't feel super confident in, it was the 6 and the 8 in those two positions, and going to be watching that going forward. I think one area where they could have more distribution come from is the center backs. I think Rodriguez did a pretty good job stepping forward in the first half and playing some of those balls forward. I think he was the guy who started the initial sequence from which the Quakes got their early goal. So he did a good job. Tanner Beeson didn't do a good job on the other side, but my hope is that Bruno Wilson, the new center back that they have signed for that role, will be able to do that. His passing stats, from what we can tell, look pretty good. And we know he's got a good left foot. We know he can switch the ball. We know he likes to look up for those passes. Me and Jamin had the opportunity to talk to him at preseason. That was a really fun interview. He's a great guy. So I'm looking forward to seeing him in that role, because I think there can be more distribution that comes from him, and having another center back who is equally confident as Rodriguez stepping forward, I think will make the Quakes a lot more dangerous. Not only in finding like long diagonals and switches, but also finding those vertical passes into the wingers, into the number 9, into the attacking midfielders, and finding Ewell and Gruezo when they are open. And a part of it is just like, if they're stepping forward into the midfield, that will open up space for everyone else. So having another center back who can do that, I think is another reason for optimism there, in way in which they can make that build out a little bit better.
Yeah, I was actually going to shift over to a conversation about the back four. I mean, until the final goal that Dante Sealy scored, the first goal was on a set piece, right? It was as they reset the second opportunity for Dallas to do something. That's when Aramendi, who I was actually talking to Jamin about this before the show. I am more on the side that this was a matter of class and him creating his own opportunity here. I mean, this is somebody who played for Real Madrid, right? This is somebody who played in La Liga, somebody who's got a reputation. So if you go back and watch it, he takes a touch past the defender and he scores, creating his own opportunity. But the question I'm getting to here is, putting that aside, because that was a set piece opportunity, and looking at the remainder of the match, the back four here. Colin, I'm going to go to you next here. Kind of your thoughts on the performance from the back four here. I'm really thinking about Tanner Beeson. There are going to be a lot of times this season when he's going to have to step in and take the role as a center back. We're hoping that we can have somebody who perhaps can be a little more efficient in the distribution out of the back. But, Tanner is an option that the Quakes have for now. He's serviceable, maybe more than serviceable. Thinking about his performance and the performance of the backline as a whole, what are you seeing?
Yeah, look, every player should be evaluated in the context of, who they are in the squad. Tanner Beeson is, if he's your backup center back, solid backup center back to have. And I'd say Daniel Muni as well, obviously right-footed versus left-footed. So you use them in different circumstances. But that's a good position to be in. If he's your starting center back, not quite as much. And it's partially for the limitations with his feet alone and in the distribution alone. Obviously, you'd probably want a guy who's been seasoned at the top flight in Portugal as well as a defender, but the distribution in particular. So yeah, no, I think he had a solid game. Nothing hugely at fault there. Rodriguez, whose name I will never be able to really nail. Is still doing a good work back there. He had a fairly conservative approach today compared to his usual. Carlos Acapo and Paul Marie, I think, are great, very strong. And I know Vitor Costa is, an exciting new signing, and there was some people who just penciled him right into the starting 11, and he did play well during his time, and he's a natural left footer. But I think that's still Paul Marie's position to lose. I think he did a really good job when he put Benji in for that one really good one-on-one with the keeper. That's something he did with his right foot, played inside the defender. That's something that that's a valid look for attack as well. So I think the fullback's very strong situation. You're looking for a pair, up center back pairing, and I think that Bruno Wilson, could potentially really be that guy. I have no problems with the back line. Plus Danielle, I think that is something that collectively makes a lot of sense. And for Yara Mendy's goal, I actually had to look up whether he was right-footed or left-footed because he hit it so well with his left foot. He is right-footed, so that was a weak foot attempt from out there. So yeah, pure class on that. That being said, pure class on that. A bit of a scruffy, fluky goal on the last one as well. Individually, if you just looked at those two individually, you'd say, man, that's kind of lucky. On the flip side of the coin, there was a whole lot of opportunities that they did not score. So, the XG of the goals they did convert, quite low. The XG of the score, but there was a lot of XG out there that they did not. So I don't think it's, you can't just, rack it up to a fluke. I think it was over 2 XG.
All right, well, it looks like we're going over to Luchi Gonzalez.
¿No? Un desorden ahí que poniendo una presión en la pelota donde no estábamos organizados y ellos fueron con todo y metieron el gol. O sea que crédito a ellos. Pero por 93 minutos me gustó mucho cómo jugamos, nuestra presión, nuestro ataque en transición, el gol, pudimos meter 2, 3 goles, ¿no? Tuvimos otra oportunidad, Benji metió un buen gol y tuve otras oportunidades. Pellegrino entró bien, los que entraron bien. Sé que una lástima, ¿no? Trabajar fuerte y hacer buenas cosas en un sitio difícil para ganar puntos y no por lo menos salir de acá con un punto. Sé que decepcionado con eso, pero vamos a seguir trabajando y tengo mucho fe en el grupo para ganar más puntos, especialmente de ida. Y yo tengo fe en el grupo para ganar a cualquiera en caso de ida y vamos a seguir trabajando y el objetivo es responder ahora contra Galaxy.
We will now go to questions in English, and we will start with Jamin Moore.
Unmuted.
Hey, Lucci. Obviously, similar result as last year, kind of the last second goal situation and a loss on the road, but it felt like an extremely different game. And it felt like your players were much more in this one for the entire time. I want to focus on 2 players. Benji Kikanovic getting the start tonight on the left, obviously got the goal, but looked very lively, had other opportunities that he either created or he participated in. But at the same time, with the verticality, it looked like Ebobisse was having a hard time finding his way in the game and how he could make an impact. Can you talk a bit about tactically how that was intended to go and, how you felt the front line did, given the combination that you had out there tonight? Thanks.
Muted.
Yeah, look, I felt really good about what we did for 93 minutes. I liked a lot of the pressure we got on the ball. The front 3 worked really hard to deny central passes, build pressure on the 3 center backs, and make it difficult. They're a very good team on the ball, and we saw through preseason they were excellent, breaking lines centrally, and I thought we took that away for most of the game. And we created issues, and we created offensive transition, and we created some good moments of higher possession. Great goal by Benji, like you said. Could have even scored another. Great effort on the field, still needing to keep working on some quality and especially when the game gets a little chaotic, can we get on the ball and and keep it a little bit more, be a little more patient, find a better chance to get the cross or shot. But look, I'm really, I like a lot of the things we did, like I said, for 93 minutes. But it was really disappointing with 30 seconds left to get disorganized there, lose numbers in the midfield, and then give up, not just the initial shot, but multiple shots. They went for it, and credit to them. Congrats to them. But I have no doubt that we can and will earn more points, home or away. I feel good about, against the performance, but the game we play sometimes doesn't reward you with a good performance. So we want to get better, and we have the opportunity to do that against Galaxy. Regarding Jabo, look, we worked on channel runs and the ability, if they were playing with 3 center backs, can we attract one of the center backs running behind? There was some miscues and where he did run it behind. We played short. He was short. We played him behind. So we got to work on coordinating that.
We will take a final question from Alex Morgan.
Hey, Luchi, thanks for joining us. Good to talk to you. I'm curious, what were the highlights for you? I think a lot of fans are going to be watching this one disappointed by the result, but looking for things to be optimistic about. And then some of the things that were concerning that you want to go back to the drawing board on and work on more in training. Because I know the fans are also going to want to see some of those issues addressed.
Yeah, I want to see them. I want to see them in the detail. The fans are going to, give us a lot of energy and support. I know playing at home against Galaxy. And if a fan didn't watch the game, I asked them, I hope they do go watch it, or they did see it, because they can see what we're, what our intentions are. And we want to perform well. We want to act and play well, but the result didn't bounce our way. And that is definitely the number one in professional. And we have to take full responsibility. So disappointing there, but I think I have a lot of faith in the group, based on the performance and building off of that. What we did well, highlights. I mean, I thought our pressure was good. Denying central passes, building pressure, forcing them to do things that were uncomfortable, and winning balls in key areas and creating good offensive transition. We created some good chances as well, which are never easy on the road. So I like that. And what we got to improve. It's these key little moments where we got to create an advantage or take away some of their flow or rhythm or momentum, especially there at the end. So with 30 seconds left, look, I thought we could have even been up 2-1 or 3-1. I thought we could have scored and even been up, but we didn't. And we need to keep that point. We need to at least value that goal point at the end with 30 seconds left, and we didn't get it done. So that's what we got to improve. And we're going to get another shot at that. And I have confidence in the group to do it better. But, let's move forward quickly and let's show a response next.
Thank you, everyone, for joining tonight's post-game press conference. That concludes tonight's session.
Good night, guys.
Before we continue with the discussion, I did want to invite folks to,
man.
Yeah, he wants to get out of there, huh? He wants out of town. Before we continue the discussion, I did want to direct folks over to quakesepicenter.com, where you can find our latest articles. Jamin has a new one up there. You can find Colin's salary spreadsheet, where you can get all of the information as we know it in regard to the players' salaries and how the team is currently operating under the salary cap. So you can find all of that there at quakesepicenter.com. Make sure to follow us on social media as well, both Instagram and Twitter. Do we have a Threads, Alex? I'm not sure if we have a Threads.
I think we have a Threads.
I thought I saw it on there. Maybe not. Okay. But anyway, I said Twitter.
X may have started our Threads, but I did.
Okay, great. We'll go look. If not, we'll start one. Okay. So let's bring it back over here to the press conference. Alex, you asked a question about some of the areas of strength, areas of improvement. You've had a lot of opportunities to speak with Luchi Gonzalez in different capacities. What do you think of his answers here, and how are you feeling in response to what you asked?
I mean, I think he's generally right about the positives. I think it's pretty easy to point out the positives. I think the central pressure that they were putting was pretty good, and they were able to create good vertical chances. We already discussed that. I think he wasn't super specific about some of the negatives, and I understand that. For me, it was really defending in zone 14. I mean, Colin, I'm not as ready to write off Dallas's first goal as a really great strike. On any corner opportunity, you need to be challenging that second ball at the top of the box. And even if there's like a weird bounce that, gets it by Jack Skane, you should have 3 more players that are blocking that ball. You should never have a case where a second ball is being shot at the top of the box because Danielle can't do anything about it. Right. So that
Alex,
was
for a
bad.
second here,
And
let
that
me
was
let me
not-
just step in a bit of soccer lingo for the folks who are joining us who might not know. Zone 14 is the area right in front of the 18-yard box. Just clarifying.
Yeah, center right in front
Jamin
of the
has 5 different articles on that on the Quakes Epicenter
Yeah,
website.
go find it.
So I refer you to the extensive historical archives from Jamin there. It was just at the top of the box. They weren't defending. That happened multiple other times. Dallas had multiple shots at the top of the box. I mean, Danielle pulled out a fantastic fingertip save for one of them that Jack Skane, again, really should have been challenging. And it's really not even Jack Skane's role. He was like dropping deep as the number 10 and covering where the other defensive midfielders should have been covering. And so, for me, it was the defensive midfielder doing their defensive duties. And maybe that you could ask Tanner Beeson to step a little bit higher as well. But I think that's the kind of core issue that stuck out to me in this one that will definitely be exploited throughout the season if it's not something that they proactively address.
Yeah, and Colin, just to quote Lucci here quickly, he said, "Take away their flow or momentum." Right, that was the one thing that he said in response to Alex's question. Just wondering here, Colin, if is this what you're saying here too? Is that essentially what it is, and what exactly does that mean?
That's fair. Actually, luckily, this is exactly kind of what I wanted to get in on. I'm usually the salary spreadsheet guy and not like the tactics whiteboard guy, but there was something I noticed today that I thought did kind of point to this exact thing that Lucci was talking about. So first of all, obviously coaches always get mad at reporters when we ask about like 4-2-3-1, 4-2-2. They're like, oh, that's such a it's too simplistic. 4-2-2 would also be leaving 2 positions off the field, so my bad. But it is simplistic to just talk about formations. It's probably better to talk about the shape when you're out of possession and you're not applying pressure, and then the shape of your pressure, i.e., where it's getting applied. For this one, obviously, during the preseason, Jack Skane was kind of playing as a second forward, and he was pressing a center back in many of those instances. Today, Jack Skane was sitting on the defensive mid because they were playing against a back 3. And the 2 wide center backs were being pressed by the wide mid, the wingers or whatever you want to call Espinosa and Kikanovic, and Jabo was pressing kind of the center back. So that means that you have Skane pressing a guy who's farther up the field, specifically Yaramendi, and trying to prevent those guys from developing the play and playing through the middle. I thought that part worked really well. So I think that the pressing structure that Lucci chose was a very good structure to choose. And I think that you cannot criticize Lucci for his tactical setup here. I think it was probably more or less the right decision in the press, probably the right decision in terms of going for a more transitional game, a more vertical game when you do have the ball. That the problem is I like that structure for those 4. To Alex's point, once you get past those 4, this 2 pivot midfielders, and they were playing side by side today for the most part, didn't quite have the right chemistry. And it's a mixture. I mean, honestly, it's probably above my pay grade tactically to know if there was a tweak that would have fixed it. But the Gruezo-Ewell midfield still hasn't really consistently shined for me. I've largely been a pro Ewell guy, and I think that he can be used productively for this team. Gruezo, all last season didn't really consistently impress for me, and I didn't get it a lot tonight either. So I don't know how much it is the personnel. Like, is Jackson Ewell, less good than I gave him credit for? Is Gruezo ever going to play to kind of a DP type level, or is it a tactical issue? At this point, I'm kind of leaning more towards the personnel at this point. But that's a concerning thing. Obviously, if they change the shape of the midfield and the opposing midfield is in a different shape, maybe it looks different. Maybe Nico Chakiris getting in there changes the way that midfield looks. Maybe they sign a DP10 who takes so much gravity away from the center of midfield that, then it opens things up for Ewell to play the way that he wants to play. I don't know. It didn't work super well tonight. Actually, one thing earlier, Phil, you were talking, or I don't remember which one of you was talking about, but, Ewell played a lot of passes vertically. He didn't connect a lot of passes vertically today. And the connections typically were happening kind of wider areas. So I don't know. That center mid partnership wasn't working today.
Hold on, Alex, I
here's
want to apply a little
my-
more pressure to one particular thing here, though, because I know that you want to respond. And I saw you kind of nodding your head a little bit in response to what Colin was saying in regards to the performance from Gruezo and Yule. And it sounded like overall you thought that the sort of defensive mid performance, or anybody who wasn't in the attacking part of the field, that it was really a personnel issue. Do you agree with Colin here that this mostly is, or do you see like a tactical tweak within the current player selection that is available for Lucci?
You're reading my mind. I don't know if there's one that's available for Lucci right now. What I was thinking, when I wanted to throw this fun little bomb into the conversation, is if you bring in a new DP number 10, whether it's actually Jack Skane who's getting replaced in that midfield, or whether it's Jackson Ewell or Carlos Gruezo getting replaced and changing the shape of the midfield a little bit, or maybe asking Skane to play a little bit deeper as a number 8, or even putting Nico Shakiris in the midfield. So I do wonder whether the new DP number 10 could give them more options so that we're not stuck with the, Yul Gruezo partnership that hasn't really ever clicked. I'm feeling like I want to see Lucci experiment with some different things there because I've never quite understood how that is supposed to work. And it feels like they have the pieces to do better in that position. They have the depth now. They have the pieces. If you get in a new number 10, I wonder whether that will give them that space to experiment.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm getting cooked in the chat. I got Skane's name wrong again, so I apologize. To Alex's point, I actually think if obviously we wish these games were won on a spreadsheet because then the nerds would rule. But if Lucci was like,
sorry.
Fair enough.
I do not subscribe to that.
Jamin does.
That's you and Jamin, okay?
Yeah. So I think, but if Lucci could kind of like create out of whole cloth a team in his image, I think he would have a single pivot, and I think that he would have two guys in front of that single pivot who have a little bit more all-around game than you would associate with a traditional number 10. Some people call this like the double 10s, double 8s, whatever you want to call it. It's something we saw a lot with the U.S. national team under Berhalter, and I think that is a system that Lucci would kind of like to emulate. And I suspect, and I suspect that sort of shape would make sense for this personnel with some tweaks. So I think that when they're looking and they're out there looking for a 10, there's a lot of, I always say this, like a 10 can mean a lot of different things. A 10 can be like a second forward who's, staying high and is mostly getting involved in the attack. A 10 can be more of a guy who's in the middle of the park, getting on the ball and progressing kind of from the middle into the attack. James Maddison at Tottenham right now is kind of more that mold. Like he's receiving the ball more in midfield and progressing it. A guy like Carlos Vela is sort of a 10, but he's not getting involved in like the build, even in the middle high areas of this pitch. He's kind of more involved at the end. Clint Dempsey, when he played for the U.S. national team, was a 10 more in the second striker mold rather than the ball progressor mold. So I think that if Lucci had his druthers, he would get a James Maddison type, somebody who is comfortable getting on the ball in the middle of the park, in tight spaces, getting closed down, but who can kind of progress it into those higher areas of the pitch. And if that's the case, then you have Gruezo as the lone pivot man. You could have Yule or Chakiris, who, in my opinion, is kind of more suited to those deeper areas of the pitch. Like I think that's where he has the biggest long-term potential. And then you'd have that DP10 as a true midfielder. But if the DP10 that they go out and get is and by the way, that would suit Amal Pellegrino much better because that would allow the wingers to be kind of true forwards. And that would allow Pellegrino to get a lot closer to goal. Kikanovic, when he's on the left wing, a lot closer to goal. And by the way, he got in really good spaces in the box. The more that you're allowing those guys to kind of get towards the box, the better. So I would love to have a center midfielder who's kind of on the ball. That's like the big DP. But if they can't find him, if they get kind of a second striker kind of guy, then they're going to have to figure out some other way to get it to work, probably through a double pivot, which, as we've all said, isn't really working right now.
Right. It kind of sounds like the player that you're talking about is what Jimero Montero was supposed to be, given the skill set that Jimero Montero had.
Yeah. Exactly.
And in terms of the second striker, I'd be really interested to see, if that's something that Chris Leach ends up going for. Right now, we have Jack Skane, right? That's kind of who we saw out there tonight, who was supposed to be playing that role, or who did play that role to an extent. But let's move on here to the last segment of this show with respect to Colin and the Eastern time zone. Alex, I'm going to go over to you first. Your final thoughts here as we leave the show. There's going to be a lot to talk about this season. I know that there's so much that we want to continue discussing, but we've got to leave some of it for the next show. Alex, your final thoughts after the 2-1 loss against FC Dallas on the road to start the season.
We'll give folks some time to go and check out all the interviews that were recorded.
There's a lot of content
recorded at the Coachella preseason camp. We talked to Jack Skane. We talked to Bruno Wilson. We talked to Luchi Gonzalez. We talked to President Jared Shawley, and we were able to get a sense of how each of them were thinking about this season. What gives them grounds for optimism, and what things they're concerned about. So maybe that can be a kind of helpful reality check after a game like this, which introduces a lot of elements of random chance, and it's hard to kind of gauge exactly where this team is at based on the first game. So encourage that. One thing I appreciate about this game, I'll say, is that it did feel like Luchi Gonzalez in the second half was going for a victory. I know that's something that we had, kind of criticized him for a little bit at the end of last season, is that he was playing very conservatively, especially in some road games, and was only playing for draws, and was kind of operating based on the logic that, if they got some points on the road and won out at home, they would be able to have enough to, scrape into the playoffs. And I don't know, that's what I associate with the spreadsheet, economic model of soccer here, Colin, is that, you can reduce everything to just how many points you need to get in the playoffs. And that feels reductive to me, because the thing that I want the Earthquakes to do this season is to go and seize these opportunities to win games on the road and to outperform, and not to do the bare minimum, because we know that this team can do the bare minimum. Like, if you ask me, can the Quakes scrape into 9th place again this season and get knocked out in the first round of the playoffs? My answer is yeah, this is the same team that they had last season with some marginal improvements. If you have the same team with marginal improvements, they'll be able to do the same thing, like marginally better maybe. But I think that they have the capacity to do more than that this season. If they get the right DP10, if they get Pellegrino integrated more, they can go and win these games on the road and approach them with a gung-ho mentality, especially the first game of the season, especially early on when players still have legs, when they have depth in the squad. So I want to see that. And I think in the second half, we saw a little bit of that tonight. We saw them actually willing to go out and be way more proactive, way more so than they were last season in the home opener, or the regular season opener last season, when they kind of got run off the pitch by Atlanta United for most of the game. So I appreciated about this one. And, the fact that they allowed the late goal and had the, defensive issues in the midfield, kind of highlights some things to be concerned about, but shouldn't detract from that kind of overall impression that they were ready to kind of seize this moment, or at least willing to try, which was good, because we have a new intro. The other thing is we have a new intro for this show in the for the Aftershock this season to celebrate the 50th anniversary of this team. It was a nice antidote after, a 94th minute goal that they allowed, to be able to watch some of the all-time Earthquakes highlights. So I suppose that is a thing to look forward to this season, even in the most dire of moments. But, all of those moments are moments that were created because a team was willing to put their necks on the line, and were willing to take chances, and were willing to push forward. And none of those moments were created by a team that was playing incredibly safe and conservatively, and just happened to get lucky. There were Earthquakes teams throughout the history that have had heart and guts and played recklessly. And, I appreciate that. And hopefully we can see more of that moving forward this season.
All right, Colin, your final thoughts here.
Yeah, well, so we actually somehow managed to not mention this during the course of the show, but the chat has recently picked up on it, that the replacement refs were actually largely quite good. I thought throughout there was no real issues I had with it until one of the worst offside calls you will ever see in your entire life. I kind of understand how it came about, because you're certainly not expecting one random defender to be way off the line with all the other defenders. But yeah, that was tough. And we also, of course, know that the assistant referees are now instructed to not raise the flag until the end of a move. So I think that's a more seasoned referee, even if they had missed the defender initially, wouldn't have raised the flag quite so quickly. Yes, replacement referees will probably be a factor in the MLS season for at least this weekend. Hopefully not too many more. but it didn't have a huge influence on the game. Anyway, look, the optimism pessimism thing is always a natural place to go to, especially in the first game of the season. I am not pessimistic on the basis of this performance. I think that tactically Lucci got it pretty spot on, and I think that the team played with a little bit more proactivity than they were playing at the end of last season. So those two things for me are encouraging things to build upon. The question is, how are they going to be able to build upon it, both with new personnel, which we haven't really seen yet, but then also just their own internal tactical development. I think that the new personnel is where you're going to have to lean on it mostly, because I think they mostly have the tactical picture figured out. So we now have to see whether or not their bets are correct. The front office and the analytics team and the coach are all kind of involved in these types of decisions. Some signings kind of go a little bit more towards one group or the other, but they have made some really good calls in the past. Danielle, was absolutely a good call, for example. They've made some good acquisitions. The question is Bruno Wilson going to join that group? Or is he going to join the, Carlos Carrizo group, where we're still really waiting to see kind of a DP level production out of him? And I think that's going to kind of determine the course of the season. I think if the guys that they already have in the building, kind of the new guys who haven't really had that much time to gel with the team, if they fold in nicely, if Benji Kikanovic steps up his performance to be more like 2022 and less like 2023, that puts you as a 9th place team right there. That puts you as a solid kind of team right there. The question is then, are they going to go over the top and get another player who's going to kind of bring them beyond that level? But yeah, nothing I saw today is going to get me scared. Coaches at the end of the game, you go to the locker room, sometimes they're going to light you up even when you win. Sometimes they're going to give, put a comforting arm around your shoulder even when you lose. I think that this is one of those losses where Lucci's probably not going to be that mad at his guys for the most part, because the effort was there. They mostly stuck to the plan and did what he asked them to do. So I don't think he has any real reason to be super upset. But the upside of this team is limited until we can see what those new guys already in the building can do, and what they play with their final card. By the way, for the people in the chat who were watching the show, I have absolutely been cooking on a PowerPoint presentation about roster building. I'm going to put together a special video sometime soon, hopefully with a special guest. It's going to talk about whether or not there is going to be this kind of upside and what kind of bets they're going to make.
Love that PowerPoint presentation.
Look, it's a new format. If you guys like it, you got to tell me, but I kind of thought it might be fun because
cool.
It's something I do in my working life. So hopefully the PowerPoint will kind of resonate with you all. But yeah, I think that's going to figure out whether or not we have the upside to go. Right now, you need those signings to click just to get into those play-in games, like 7 to 10. That's the ceiling right now for me. And I think that they have a couple big slots. They have a lot of slots to use to go beyond that if they want to. And we'll see if they can identify the right guys for those talents.
As long as the PowerPoint has fun images that we can follow, Colin, and it's not
colorful. Not a lot of images.
Does it have the Aftershock logo on it? Does it have the new logo?
No, it doesn't.
Okay, I think that needs to probably go on there, Colin.
Yeah.
All right. Well, as we close out the show, I want to just kind of add on to what both of you were saying about some of the optimistic points that you brought up. And I was reading Jamin's article that is currently on quicksepicenter.com, and he references Teodal Soccer at Absolute Unit on Substack. And one of the things that they talk about on their Substack is that teams who are playing at a great disadvantage due to talent often play what's like a non-soccer. And for me tonight, I don't think we necessarily saw that from the Earthquakes. I think we saw a team that came out and pushed back and fought, and we saw some individual performances that were standout. During the show today, we talked about Christian Espinoza and the impact that he had, but we also saw some sparks from guys like Rodriguez, right? At the end of the match, he was somebody who was kind of carrying the banner, the vanguard, trying to get something going in the attack, right? He did leave the team vulnerable a bit in doing that, seeing as how he plays center back, but we were seeing those individual moments from players. And up until the very end of the match, I mean, they were producing and they were creating opportunities at times. Lucci mentioned it. I mean, we didn't even talk about the other opportunities that Benji actually had created. He had another shot on goal. If the Quakes had perhaps latched on to the rebound similar to what they got on the first goal, then perhaps things would look a lot differently. But those are all hypotheticals, right? The fact of the matter is the Quakes lost points on the road. They lost 3 points. They lost a couple points initially, but then they ended up losing everything here and leaving with nothing, from having the lead to having it be a draw to leaving with a loss, which is really difficult and challenging. But again, I want to go back to the point here, which is the Quakes were not playing non-soccer. They were coming out and they were trying to make things happen, and there were some really great moments. And so that is something that we can take away from this match. I don't know if that's going to make anybody who's listening to the show right now feel any better, but it's going to be interesting to see how the Quakes respond after this, going home and playing a Cali Classico match against the LA Galaxy, which is going to be really exciting. We're going to have something special set up for y'all over at PayPal Park.
Wow.
Alex, it looks like you want to say something.
Would you look at this? John Jay is the first one on a post-game aftershock to use some of our fun new tools, because we passed, I guess the thing that hasn't been announced, Phil, is that because we passed 1,000 subscribers over the off season, we have some fun new tools where people can send some tips here in the show and send some super comments and super stickers.
I didn't know we had that. That's
more
really
fun
cool
experience for everyone.
That's really cool.
So thank you, John Jay.
Here, it's funny. I did notice. I did notice that when I was watching some of the aftershock content at Coachella, that suddenly there are a lot more ads that you get when you watch the channel, because we have reached that subscriber mark. So YouTube has definitely monetized Quakes Epicenter. Let's hope that we can get something out of it too. So anyway, go check out quakesepicenter.com. One thing that I didn't mention during the show that's really important to us and keeps things going for us is the Patreon. If it wasn't for the Patreon, it would be a lot more challenging for us to continue bringing you the show week after week, sometimes multiple times during the week, especially when the Quakes have 2 or 3 games in an 8-day period. But also, allowing our journalists here to travel and cover the team during the preseason, to allow our journalists who are not located here in the Bay Area to come out for some of the matches and to provide coverage as well. So the Patreon is a really great tool that we use in order to ensure that that can happen and that we can provide the best coverage for you possible. So if you can go over to quakesepicenter.com/Patreon, you can find the Patreon there, and for as little as a couple dollars a month, you can become a patron. If you pay $5 a month or more, you also get access to the Patreon Slack, which is a really great place where a lot of us members of the Patreon come together to talk during the game, to talk in between the games, to share information that we have in regard to the team, and to celebrate the San Jose Earthquakes. There is one other thing I wanted to mention too. I wanted to give a special shout out to Gary Singh. Alex, you got to interview him. I think it was yesterday or the day before, and you talked about his new book, The Unforgettable San Jose Earthquakes. This is now available for purchase. Alex, if you have a copy, if you want to show it, folks. There it is.
Looks beautiful.
This is Gary's,
it's a very fun read.
Absolutely.
Highly recommend.
Highly recommend. Gary takes us through the decades from the 1970s all the way up to the present day. This is his second book. His first book is also really amazing. I highly suggest you go check it out if you like to nerd out on all things San Jose Earthquakes. And one thing I did want to mention here, since we're talking about Gary and some of his thoughts in regard to the team, he's been covering the team for quite a long time. I think since 2001, he's been a journalist working with the Earthquakes in some capacity. And one thing that he said that really stood out to me that I thought was important was that the Earthquakes are an organization that hasn't been around in the same, it hasn't been the same business entity since 1974. I think we all know that, right? But the fans have been the same since that time. And that's actually really important because here in the US, soccer is still a relatively new sport when you compare it to, the UK or Spain or these countries where they've had it for literally over a century, right? And they have these fan bases that are generational, like deep generational. And so the Quakes actually are one of the teams that is starting to collect all of that history already in a way that a lot of other teams haven't done. And they are going down a pathway, a grassroots pathway that is blazing a trail for, I think, what we want to see in the American soccer landscape. So I just wanted to make sure I shared that. He also did give a little bit of a slight to LAFC, Alex, in your interview, considering them a manufactured team, which is in fact true. But I highly suggest folks go check it out. Read Gary's book. It's great. It's fantastic. I'm glad that we had an opportunity to ask him some questions and bring him on to the Aftershock. And I do want to once again thank everybody for joining us tonight.
Horizon.
Yep.
And we've had,
thanks.
while you've been talking, Phil, we've had a bidding war that's been going on in the chat.
I don't know. I saw the numbers popping up. I didn't know quite what was going on.
I gotta come on for this.
Got Jamin on.
Hey, Jamin.
I'm gonna come on for this because I need to educate you guys. So the way YouTube is supposed to work is when somebody gives you a donation, you literally stop talking and say thank you for the donation. So I'm here to educate you as your producer to make sure that when people do that, you give them a shout. All right, I'm out. Bye.
There's plenty. There's Squad Horizon. We have to thank.
Yeah,
Who
let's go
else?
through
I think
the
it's
list.
funny that
Brian
Jamin is
Hubler,
educating us millennials
John
and Gen
Jay.
Zs
Yeah.
for like how YouTube is supposed to work.
I don't know. I don't really follow anybody else's channel. I only follow Quake's Epicenter. All right. So I don't know how this normally works. It's our first time
$10
doing
more
this.
dollars, and we'll make Jamin do a little dance on the show.
I want to thank John Jay for his contribution. I want to thank Brian Hubler. Thank you so much. Jesus Solorio, thank you so much. KMJ Vet, thank you so much for your contribution. Really appreciate it. Squad Horizon, $10. Thank you so much for your contribution. Every little bit helps, you guys. I just want to say thanks from the bottom of my heart. And thanks to all of us from Quake's Epicenter. Guys,
I think that means we get another Jamin appearance. That's what I think.
And a winky face. Thank you, Jesus. We really appreciate your contribution. Actually, we always appreciate you. You know, I know that you've been with us for a while, and thank you so much for joining us tonight, for contributing to Quake's Epicenter, and yeah, for your amazing comments. Brian, $10.
There's been $21.
Brian, you're our hero.
For the Jamin Jake. If Jamin doesn't reappear on the show now to do it, we'll make him do it.
Oh my God.
Does that count? I don't know.
Sure.
Hey,
Perfect. That was perfect.
The nights
You
where
guys
there's
didn't think we were
losses.
gonna have this much fun after a game like that, but we did.
No, but what we say is when there's a loss, that's the time we need to get on here and kind of like have some fun, right?
For
Because
sure.
otherwise, like you're just gonna have a terrible time every time. Thank you, everyone. We really do appreciate the donations. And next week, by the way, Alex, myself, Phil, Robert, we will be near the bar, not the central part, to the side of the bar. So if you want to come over, watch the show, support us from there, make noise in the background, maybe Anae will even pan the camera to you. Come over, watch the show live, say hi. We really would appreciate it, actually. So, but you can come catch us on the other side of the bar.
Absolutely. Make sure you come on over and say hello. Thanks for that, Jamin. All right, guys, I think that's going to close us out for tonight. I just want to say thank you to everybody for joining us. Make sure you check out quakesepicenter.com, follow us on social media, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you.